What will stick with me probably most from the work with the partnership are the daily struggles that go unappreciated among the American poor. And poor here is an ambiguous term. I think it's good for people to realize that when we read that 46 or 48 million people are below the poverty line, that's a severe underestimate of the number of people who are struggling. And we wrote about this when we studied scarcity, the psychology that comes with not having enough. But when you sit with people and talk to them and realize the simple daily challenges of getting in time for the bus to go from job one to job two while worrying about childcare, those in, day out, non-stop struggles, which you sort of know and you read about, but it doesn't have the same poignancy, the same palpability of when you meet these people, sit around, look at them, their intelligent, struggling, tired eyes, and as they go through, it's something you don't forget. Yeah, so the misleading narratives come in different levels and different formats. There's quite a few of them. You can start from very intuitive psychological ones. So a lot of work in social psych shows that when you try to interpret a scene, when you see people behave in a certain way, you underappreciate the power that the situation has in what they're doing and think it's them and their attitudes and their beliefs that's making them do what they do. So if I lose patience with my daughter, it's because I'm tired, I haven't slept well, my boss is mean, etc. When you lose patience with your daughter, it's because you're a bad father. This is a very standard phenomenon. And when you look at the context of poverty, when we look at the poor, they don't behave well very often. They're late, they lose their patience, they forget. And what we do then, instead of realizing, there's no babysitter, there's no boss, they haven't slept enough, there's noise, there's crime, we think they're not trying hard enough. And so the impulse then is to try to educate them, to discipline them instead of making life easier. And that's a narrative that can be extremely unproductive and hurtful. So that's at the very psychological. Then comes the sort of social level, societal stories. And we, more than most nations, actually, more than most Western nations, insist on independence, you're responsible for your fate. And so if you haven't succeeded, it's because you're not talented or haven't tried hard enough. And that's just profoundly false. We have a lot of data to show that a lot of what happens to you is a function of where you were born and your economic status when you began, etc. Mobility, so to speak, is limited. And so that narrative that blames people for not succeeding is another terrible one. And along with it, the narrative that says, look, this person succeeded, that's a proof that you could do it, is a terrible narrative too. I mean, you might win the lottery, it's not a proof that therefore we can win the lottery. And yes, of course, occasionally people make it. Our Secretary of Housing is a famous case of somebody who made it and thinks that because he made it, anybody who tries can make it. It's a terrible mistake, misunderstanding the role of chance and luck in a greater scheme of things. And so if you look at all these narratives together, they end up really hurting our ability to understand and provide for policies that help those who are less fortunate. Okay, who has the responsibility for dealing with the narrative around poverty today? In my world, government will do a lot more. It's not necessarily the American world of today. People are reluctant to involve government more than they must. And so that leaves the responsibility to others. Look, in a sense, of course, all of society is responsible for trying to understand society. It just makes all of us better off. The boss who understands that their worker is working less well because she's not sleeping well will make bigger profits. I mean, in other words, it's helping everybody understand the issue correctly. Not to mention that the great majority of Americans are well-intentioned people who want to do well, they're just not getting it. So in that sense, I think it's everybody's responsibility. To the extent that we can't get government involved immediately, and I think that's where we're here, you want sort of private Americans and organizations who are able to do it, kind of to unite forces and try to work on this. And clearly the hope, I think, is that once we start making the right steps in the right direction, when municipalities and mayors and governors and presidents see that this is the way to go, obviously it will shape policy, in a long run, in a grander scheme of things.